Hello. Nim Game here. Have you ever talked to yourself? You probably have a few times. Right? That is a very normal expression. People who often talk to themselves may be doing it to reduce stress, soothe loneliness, or seek empathy. But today I am not talking about us. I am talking about the characters inside the Playtime company factory. In the game Poppy Playtime, Mommy Longlegs speaks for Poppy through ventriloquism. Miss Delight talks to the lifeless doll Barb, and Lily talks to Candy's head. All of these things have one thing in common. They are all talking to something imaginary. Something that is not real. This is a very interesting thing. This time, we will explore the hidden theme in the story of Poppy Playtime. And today's theme is imaginary friends. But we will also go deep into the true identity of Ollie. Something that can be seen from this overall structure. I am not talking about the prototype pretending to be him. I am talking about the imaginary friends formed by the characters here. In the game Poppy Playtime, many orphans appear in the story. They are the children in Playcare, including Marie Payne, Mommy's experiment subject. Playcare is a large orphanage meant to protect children without families, without anyone to rely on, provide them with a safe place to live, and create new families for them through adoption. This can be considered the better place. Better plus, that Elliot Ludwig aimed for children. However, inside it, there were also orphans who suffered psychological trauma. So Playcare had dedicated counselors to care for their mental health. Not only the characters I just mentioned, there was also another victim. The boy Theodore Gramble, the child who became catnapped, and he was one of them. The counselors knew that Theodore had a friend under his bed, described as a monster with large, long hands. The scientists mistakenly thought it was an imaginary friend, an entity that does not truly exist but is felt and spoken to as if it were real. This is a common phenomenon in children and is not abnormal. It is a natural part of imagination and emotional processing. It appears to soothe loneliness, calm anxiety, or express emotions. Adults can also feel a similar presence in creative activities or when coping with stress. But basically, it is considered a character created inside the mind. In other words, it is a friend born from the mind but treated as if it exists outside. In reality, Theodore was not imagining it. There really was an entity called the prototype. Subject 1006. From Detective Jareth H's investigation report and the testimony of the witness read, it is clear that Prototype 1006 truly exists. Therefore, the part of the prototype's arm that Theodore drew was not merely pure imagination. And that is the reason why later, after being transformed, the boy's memories were still always directed toward this friend, the prototype. The important point here is that something real was treated as an imaginary entity. This can be seen as a kind of reassurance for people who have never come into contact with toy monsters, making them believe that it was only a hallucination. But when considering this precedent, an opposite structure is also possible, the case where an imaginary entity is treated as real. And this structure may be common among other characters in the factory. We can see this in the character Miss Delight. She was trapped inside the school after the hour of joy. She went through lonely days while continuing to fight for survival against her sisters. Barb was originally only something she created as a weapon, an inorganic object made from a ruler and pencils. Naturally, it had no will, no face, and no mouth. However, under extreme circumstances, Miss Delight began to treat Barb as a conversation partner. It was an imaginary friend born inside her mind. This relationship has lasted until today, as can be seen in the scene where the protagonist infiltrates the school and she talks to her weapon as if she is truly having an exchange. Another character who is exactly the same is Lily Lovebraids. Lily also calls Candy, who at this point is only a head, by the name Candy and builds a relationship with it. Similarly, Lily was intentionally isolated by the prototype on Sweet Street. It is believed that Candy was born in that lonely environment. The important point here is the relationship with an inorganic object. The key is that the conversation still functions as a conversation. In other words, an entity that originally has no will is treated as if it has will. This structure is expressed in the form of ventriloquism. This feature makes me feel chills when I recall Chapter 2. After Mommy kidnaps Poppy, she proposes a game with the protagonist to win the train ticket. Performing ventriloquism in the voice of Poppy, who has her mouth covered with webbing. This is clearly an intentional action by Mommy. But it has the same structure, creating a voice that does not exist from the subject. In other words, these three characters have something in common. They were placed in lonely environments. They faced a lifeless object, and they were able to converse with that object. This is a structure of treating something that does not exist as if it exists. And it functions as an externalization of an imaginary friend. In addition, they also have another common point, a game structure reminiscent of red light, green light. Mommy reveals her loneliness inside the statues. Miss Delight's chase, the statue, and Lily's guest welcoming game all have very similar structures. This coincidence indicates that all three were designed within the same context. Is Ollie an imaginary friend? To summarize what has been discussed, the core of this analysis lies in the shared structure of the imaginary friend. An imaginary entity born from loneliness becomes indistinguishable from reality, and this is expressed through the form of ventriloquism. This structure is described consistently across many characters. In previous analyses, we built the hypothesis that Ollie is Poppy's imaginary friend. Ollie is an imaginary friend created by the lonely Poppy. The important point here is the contrast with Theodore's case. In Theodore's case, a real prototype was considered an imaginary friend. In Poppy's case, Ollie, who is considered real, may actually be an imaginary entity. And in the end, Ollie appeared in real life in the form of the prototype. In other words, this work can be seen as describing a structure in which imagination and reality are reversed. Furthermore, the official story suggests that the Poppy Playtime doll was a product made for children whose parents had given up on communicating. This shows that Poppy herself plays a role similar to an imaginary friend, in the sense that she exists as a substitute for real human relationships. This structure is reinforced by the fact that the neural mapper device makes Ollie's voice, after being created by the prototype, have a digital sound quality. And an ARG game discovered a sound similar to Ollie's phone ringtone coming from Poppy's eye. Considering these points, it is possible that Ollie, the entity existing inside Poppy, was reconstructed by the prototype into reality using the neural mapper device. In other words, an imaginary entity was materialized through technology. From this perspective, Poppy symbolizes loneliness, and the prototype contrasts with an imaginary friend that has become reality. Therefore, it is very likely that Poppy also has an imaginary friend. Furthermore, when compared with the shared structures of a little girl being intentionally imprisoned and possibly having an imaginary friend, all of these apply to Poppy. If a chase-type game structure with Poppy is repeated in Chapter 6, this shared structure will be strengthened even more. From what has happened, the basic theme of this work has become clear. Entities born from loneliness become reality. Or in other words, the embodiment of imaginary friends. And it can be thought that the prototype exists as the complete form of this. Entities born from the heart of a child take shape in reality. Elliot Ludwig's line, "The true miracle lies in the heart," may have been hinting at this structure. This underlying theme is believed to be the basis of the structure in which the better place created by Elliot is playcare. So my question here is, what about the friends that the player is looking for? Are they real? Perhaps we will have to wait until the next part to find the answer. Right? If you found this analysis interesting, please subscribe to the channel and hit like.